Welcome on down to Frey's Barn of Potential Men, where we've got more promises than promise, and somehow,
안녕.
not a Rodion ID. And boy, have I got a beaut for y'all today. Among the sun shower she and Hohenheims, there is a spanking new washed up freeze-tagged finger. This baby can fit so many unbreakable coins, and today, we're going into exactly how you can get a juicy godlike prescription to access all of them so that by the end, you won't believe he ain't the Black Silence. So, you should get this ID. And if you're one of the folks that already commented that this was the answer, please subscribe now to continue, because we both know you're here for more than just the answer to a yes or no question. Here's how he works. The TLDR is that this song is a poise syncing ID that has every chance to serve these teams well, but is more built around reaching his most powerful move than anything else. Take everything you know about index IDs, a dose of shin, and a self-generating skill 3, and random bullshit go is looking damn fine. And while we do have plenty of time to be surprised by other Nursefather IDs, the fact that this is Kanto 9's and Dawn's own Prescript Papa himself, with a synergy headpat to boot, means that there is every chance he's like Season 6's Lei-Hang Merceau, a fingerman who can carry a team, and the number 2 ID of the season right behind the bad end. And look, if I sound too hyped, no need to worry, we're still gonna address what could make him worse. But to do that, we first gotta cover all 3 of his pages. The House of Spiders, the Index Nursefather Yi song, has a total of 7 different keyword statuses specific to either him or the Index faction, and that's not even counting the funny effects on coins. So if I didn't already make a fine point out of it yet, we're treating this review more as a guide on how you can give him the most powerful turn with his ultimate skill possible, because doing that's basically the same as getting him online in general. To reach his peak, he needs to meet 7 different conditions, some of which form a kind of skill tree where you need to get certain buffs before you can get others. As usual, it sounds a lot more complicated than it is, and we'll have a visual by the end, so here's where you start. First and foremost, we have his Prescript device where he gets his 3 little favor jobs on his tiny beeper. And yes, I do mean 3, the 4th one may as well be flavor text. Following these leads him to getting 3 buffs that he needs to reach his ideal state: Grace of the Prescript, Unlock, and Procuration Hermes. And while there's technically an alternative, that comes at a cost that we're gonna address later. For now, he works like every other Index ID. Every turn, he gets a skill with a mark and a target with a mark. And to keep it super simple, if you just keep hitting the marked target with the marked skill, you'll get through all 3 prescripts very easily and get their buffs. And even if I don't have an exact source for that, I do have a proxy that's just as good enough that you should expect to see her listed as a source for whenever I fill in X with a specific number. Like this! Speaking of which, she gets a buff for using those marks if she's on the field with her prescript parent. But like Daughter, most of Yi-Song's prescripts are identical to hers, with one exception. Rien-Song's 3rd prescript is for him to get a buff called Procuration Hermes. Now again, hitting a marked sucker with a marked skill will do the job just fine. Hammer meets nail, everyone without a prosthetic is happy, and I'll go over exactly how you get Procuration Hermes in a bit because you're gonna wanna max out on that religious charge soon. But if you keep hitting your marks and hammering that nail, you'll be sitting at a fat stack of Hermes, maxed out Grace, and his first major buff, Unlock 3. The latter of which is what gets you Pager Poppy's good fortune, and the 2nd major buff. Index Yi-Song's passive, the Oracle's Proxy / Unlock, touches on a lot of how the prescripts work, like how you get more SP by following them, and an index-specific flavor of Fragile named Karmic Consequence by ignoring them. Again, if Hammer hits nail, you're totally fine. But should you do this until you max out Grace and Unlock and get to Unlock 3, Yi-Song will get Shin Fate the next turn. This is a buff that ups the man's min and max speed, his poise potency and count generation, and a damage buff based on how much more SP he has than his target. And this is where we start to see how his poise and sinking generation helps out his plays, which we'll be coming back to every so often. Next up, how's about we take a look at the odd man's face, and wouldn't you know it, that mask is also a passive. The Index Nursefather passive has Yi-Song enter the fight with the Wound Casing Mask status, which ups his offense level, drops his defense level, and reduces the damage he takes from unopposed attacks, much like his namesake. And while it's a pretty fine piece of porcelain, it's more the inside that counts here. because his third buff on deck is made of face fajitas. Sizzling Wound has the same effects as its predecessor, but also gives Yi-Song burn and bleed potency every turn, and a damage buff with his unbreakable coins. Now, to answer the immediate questions, yes, this does put his life on a timer without outside healing, and yes, he will be able to make great use of that UB buff before he becomes District 23 Takeout. But how exactly does he get it? Well, according to the same passive, it's simple. You just bash his face in a few times! Yeah, if you get him into a stagger threshold, he will not only go skinless, but recover from his stagger immediately. Of course, there is another way to get him there that's less harsh on his body, but all good things come with time. Cause so far, I've been jumping around 2 of these pages at will for the sake of getting y'all acquainted with getting him to his peak. That said, we'll need to cover a lot of Yeezy's remaining passives before getting to the next buffs. For instance, Oracle Device Caduceus is a passive that makes every coin in Yi-Song's kit have a random effect and damage type. There are a total of 9 of them, equally split between dealing slash, pierce, and blunt damage. All but 2 have innate damage buffs, and they all have an extra bit of flair if they're hit as an uncracked unbreakable coin. Those are gaining poise potency, inflicting sinking potency, gaining offense level up, inflicting defense level down, raising the enemy stagger threshold, inflicting slash, pierce, and blunt fragility, and guaranteeing a crit with a weapon that's the closest we're ever getting to Farm Watch. And yes, all of these are in addition to what the skills do by default. In other words, don't expect to control the damage type, and do expect to be rewarded for using UBs. This passive also has 3 other effects, 2 that we'll address later, because now's the perfect time to get into the 4th status Yi-Song needs to buff himself, Procuration Hermes. Just about the rest of the passives touch on this anyway, so why not? This is a charge-like resource that allows our Digit Daddy here to make use of his skill 3-2, Furioso Replica. He'll get it whenever you use the marked skills, though that's not the only way. The Sin-powered passive, Imitation of a Life, gives Yi-Song the standard index buff of dealing at least 2% more damage for every grace on himself, and at least 20 more if he gets max grace. More importantly though, it'll give Yi-Song more procuration whenever he uses a skill with unbreakable coins, whether or not they hit. The only exception to this rule is when he's using Furioso Replica and only gets a fraction of those unused coins as procuration. Put simply, all signs both from this ID's namesake and the character he's imitating suggest that Procuration Hermes caps out at 9 and that you can generate between 4 to 5 per turn with any of Yi-Song's first 3 skills. Based on this, you'll be able to give Yi-Song his ultimate every 3 to 4 turns depending on what this X is here in the middle line of the status. Just know that this 4th key to making him powerful only gives you Furioso Replica after you've gotten to unlock 3 and his Shin. But since we're on the topic, how about we finally check out that 9-coin beauty of a bootleg? Furioso Replica is a 9-coin Wrath skill with unfocused volley that technically qualifies as a slash skill even if the coins may say otherwise. It's got 7 attack weight and is limited to a single copy on the dashboard because, like Roland, this skill will not reproduce. It also deals more damage if it's the subject of the index mark, which, by the way, is the 5th way to make this move as powerful as it can be. Don't worry about the random chance factor either. Yi-Song's pre-script delivered on a device and Imitation of a Life passives will both prioritize skill 3s for getting the mark, and even manifest one if Procuration gets to its max stack at the end of the turn. So this skill's always going to show up right on time and pre-packaged with the mark when you need it. And on the skill itself, it's got an interesting way of handling its coin power. It can't gain more, but will gain a fraction of the net coin power as final power. For example, let's say that this move has the familiar coin values at 5 base power and 1 coin power, and this little X here is set to 3, based on nothing, just example. If Yi-Song gets 1 more coin power for 9 coins, that's a net 9 coin power increase. Divide that by 3, and this means that the move gets 3 final power instead. In short, just don't expect this to make this more powerful by juicing its coins. But on the upside, Paralyze ain't gonna hold you back either, so it's not like you'll be cheated by old Silty or anyone else. Back on the final power though, he'll gain more of it based on the pinking between him and the target. And after all that's done, all 9 of those coins convert to being unbreakable. So, thank Hermes and remember that Sizzling Wound exists for a time like this, and let it rip. Every hit will either inflict sinking on the enemy or poise on himself, and he will gain clash power and poise potency and count on use. Plus, if you manage to go without cracking any coins, you'll get a nice bonus. That 9th coin will always be the scythe, which will deal more damage on a crit, and if uncracked, inflict what I'm willing to bet money is a fat chunk of sinking count, and a guaranteed crit based on the scythe's effects. And lastly, anyone caught in the Blade Storm gets a healthy dose of burn, bind, and fragile next turn. So Happy burn season, everyone! I'm sure the harvest eventually gets less depressing, right? In all seriousness, this move will come at the cost of all the procuration Hermes on Fingerfather Yisong, and stop him from gaining any until next turn. So, don't expect to cycle this move every turn or two. However, this move's already mentioned the 6th way it can be empowered. That's through the more obvious causes, poise and sinking. We haven't addressed them much, but being able to generate both of these are pretty damn important for getting the max damage on this sucker. So let's see how his other skills fare at doing that. First, Yisong's Evade by Unpredictable Whim may be his most reliable way of generating poise count. It's a gloom skill that gains coin power at high enough unlock and gains poise count at combat start and poise potency on evade. Depending on how long you can evade for and whether he has shit on deck, this may be a reliable way to recharge your poise if you're near the end of your stack. Admittedly, this is one of the times where we can't easily use precedent to tell how easy of a time he's gonna have with his skills with the current info, but Project Moon has shown with Ren Sinclair, they're not afraid to give someone 4 poise count on an evade. So even if he's not a pure poise unit, getting 2 to 3 on an index ID ain't out of the question. The thing is though, this skill has another use. Remember when I said there was technically an alternative to getting unlock other than the prescripts? This is that option. Borrowing from his index fingerling apprentice, he can forcibly gain unlock at the cost of gaining karmic consequence. This technically allows him to skip at least 1 turn to get to unlock 3 due to the way it's calculated. More of that in the Don Quixote review. But while it can save him time getting online, you might want to think twice before cheating God like that, because it's got more consequences than just briddling his bones. And we can see that more in the offensive skills. Korean Poland here has the honor of being the first ID that has 1 skill for each attack type, in theory. Because, you know, that weapon randomizer is still at play after all. However, he will deal more damage if he generates a weapon that matches the attack type on the tin. And the chances of that can either be higher or lower than average depending on how much karmic consequence he has. In other words, if you ignore the prescripts or use the evade to speedrun getting his unlock going, you will have a lower chance of getting this damage buff forever. He may stop getting that sticky KC after maxing out his unlock, but Grandpapa Hermes ain't forgiven his transgressions and that karma is never going away. So know that this is the index ID that is the most to lose when facing the consequences. Now all 3 skills also share 2 other traits in common. They get different buffs when used with the mark like any other index ID, but the more important one comes back to that bubbling wound of his. The Sizzler here really likes his red coins. So all of these skills will convert theirs to UBs based on the unlock stage, starting with the final one. The skill 1 will change all the coins at the unlock stage -1, the skill 2 will change them based on the unlock stage full stop, and the skill 3 will change them based on the unlock stage +1. And I say that X is 1 because, come on, there's no other number that allows this to match the exact number of coins on the tin. But how about the skills themselves? Yisong's skill 3 is a gloom attempt at a slash skill that will convert itself into Furioso Replica at max procuration Hermes. But when used on its own, will deal more damage if marked and gain coin power based on pinking. The move also generates poise count and some poise potency based on the unlock stage. And finally, the coins apply pinking potency, and the 4th coin deals more damage based on the unlock stage, rewards him with poise count on crit, and adds some sinking count to the final coin hits without cracking. Quick reminder that because the way this skill handles its UBs, that final coin will always be unbreakable. And it's not the only skill with this effect. Kite from Hunter x Hunter here has a skill 2 that's a pride attempt at a pierce skill and gains final power when marked, gains coin power based on pinking, and gains poise on use. The coins themselves will inflict sinking with count coming in if the final coin is an unbroken UB, and generate poise count. While it's nothing too stand out, having both the skill 2 and 3 inflict sinking count means that half of his skills are capable of it now. And trust me, we are not done seeing what he can do with sinking. That said, the skill 1 ain't the savior here. It's a perfectly fine gluttony attempt at a blunt skill that gains coin power based on pinking and generates poise count on use. Now, this does mean that between just the base 4 skills without Furioso, 3 of these will give Yisong poise count on use, and all of them will generate that count in some way. So while the evade is the most reliable way to save that stack and prepare for Furioso, you shouldn't run into trouble with normal play. That all said, he'll still gain poise potency on use and inflict sinking potency with a UB in the final coin. Overall, Yi-Song's base skills give many more opportunities for poise to generate than sinking, which is usually the case here. But there's still a final buff he has that shores it up in a big way. So let's go back to that with 2 final passive effects. Oracle Device Caduceus will convert Yi-Song's wound casing mask into Sizzling Wound after the first time he's used Furioso Replica in an encounter. So even if it's slower, he can melt in real time without getting a concussion, but should you get Furioso Replica on deck after his face reveal, Rian Yi-Song will get his 7th and final buff for a powerful skill 3-2, Indulge in Prescripts. Indulge in Prescripts is a buff that exists only during the turn Furioso Replica is on the field and applies a buff to min and max speed, causes FR to deal more damage, makes it inflict and apply more sinking and poise potency with its hits, and makes it apply sinking count on hit. In other words, this buff makes his 9-coin move entirely sinking count neutral, and even sinking positive if the final coin hits uncracked. Putting all of this together, this ID has the makings of a self-sustaining poise build, and while his status as a sinking potency or count unit is in question, he has the potential to make use of a sinking team's potency stack without breaking it at all around turn 7. Now of course that is if the fight gets to turn 7, but come on, we're calling him a potential man for a reason, right? In all seriousness though, while his sinking isn't guaranteed, he's not counted out of it either. And even still, neither of these are the main draw of the ID. So how about we check out the vision board and then get into what we should be looking at once the numbers come out. Oh, and wouldn't you know it, this ain't just the first 3-page ID, but the first 2-page vision board. Yeah, I really didn't want to make this harder to look at than it needed to be, so now we got vision creep. First things first, Yi-Song will be able to buff Don Quixote so that she gets her extra damage when playing with Mark just by being there, and any actions that risk karmic consequence should be considered before you break Hermes' commandments. But with that in mind, Phase 1 is all about getting to Unlock 3 and Shin Fate, and Yolan's got 2 ways to do just that. Option 1 is doing his god commands and following the prescripts all the way through the first 3. It's slower, but avoids the consequences. Alternatively, he can use the evade to get through the phase quicker at the cost of getting consequences. Just remember, losing index social credit doesn't mean he just has a worse time of getting the weapon he wants, but also drops his defense level, causing his evades to get weaker. However you do it though, he'll get another choice once he gets Shin and moves to phase 2. From here, the next step is to get him to take off that mask and show off that sizzling wound. Option 1, of course, is for him to be a good prescript boy and keep generating his procuration so that he uses Furioso Replica and drops it. Or alternatively, you could ask him to make a choice for once in his life and stagger him, which will also disarm him from the neck up. Either way, once you got him red in the face, that brings us to phase 3, where it gets much more linear. At this point, you've gotten all the main buffs and just need to make sure the fundamentals are set. Keep stacking that poise with all the main skills and keep track of the sinking on the team where possible until it's time to circle back around to using the upscale of the same move and ruin him. Except this time, John Spork's gonna do it with a greedy grin on his face now that he's indulging in his prescripts. Take pride in knowing that the sufferings never end with a count neutral Furioso, and then cycle back to stage 3 until you're ready to do it all over again, until he finally gets unfrozen and grilled to a crisp with its self-inflicted burn. It's just that simple. At least it is in theory. Normally this is where I'd go over where the ID could be ruined, but with everything that's on deck, the ult, the Shin, the number of damage buffs and UBs, it's gonna take a lot to ruin this sucker. So much so that I don't think it's reasonable to expect it to be ruined. However, I do think we should consider what the weaknesses of this ID are and what values to watch out for more than others. First, obligatory clash power and low status application mention. Those could technically ruin the ID, but as long as the main 3 moves follow the current 15, 20, 25 power meta, that's no issue. More importantly, we should address the count guzzler in the room. FR may be able to be sinking neutral, but 9 coins on a scale can eat up a ton of poise count. I'm not saying I think it's gonna be a major problem, but keep watch on exactly how much poise count Furioso generates on use and how much Shin Fate adds to it. If you're at 20 poise potency, that means you're dropping 9 count on the move and 1 more at turn end. So ideally, we want to have at least 11 count by the time the Furioso turn starts. Otherwise, you're gonna have to rebuild that stack from scratch, which is gonna really eat into the damage output. But if FR generates at least 7 count, you won't really have to worry about it. That's just a big if. Next, this ID is only second to Lantern Yi-Song in terms of IDs that are built to die. Between losing defense skill at face value, the karmic consequences, and his body dissolving in real time from his wound, this man's is here for a good time and not a long time. Sure, he has unlocked to offset the defense loss and is able to get a lot of clash power and offense level up, but the instant he either hits that first stagger threshold or rips that Furiosa wannabe, the clock is ticking. Now, it's nothing a regular dose of fluid sac won't fix, but if he either has a high amount of burn and bleed applied to him, say more than a total of 15 guaranteed damage total per turn, or a second stagger threshold, well, you're gonna need to watch him to make sure he doesn't wither away during his violent LARPing session. Then we've got his Procuration Hermes values. I mentioned earlier that this resource would have either a max value of 4 or 5 generated per turn. The thing is that this difference between 4 and 5 makes a serious change to the Mongless Wonder's tempo. Now again, I feel safe saying that this funny prescript charge is gonna cap out at 9 max. Yi-Song's got 9 weapons, Rien had it cap at 9, and even Roland in his heyday had it cap at 9. And if PM was willing to make She-Faust wait 4 turns to deal 444% damage, then I doubt they're gonna shy away from keeping the number 9 here. With that in mind, this means that if Yi-Song gets a max of 5 Procuration a turn, he can spend 2 turns building it, then the 3rd turn using Furioso Replica, making for a 3-turn loop. But if it's a max of 4 per turn, he's only getting up to 9 after 3 turns, and then using it on the 4th turn for a 4-turn loop. Now don't get it twisted, a move like this is easily worth waiting 4 turns. But considering the guy's on a ticking clock, this means an extra turn's gonna determine just how many chances he gets to let that scythe work rip. Again, not a deal breaker, but it's a case where that X being 2 is worth so much more than it being 1. Keep watch for it. And lastly, I gotta say again, I am not expecting much out of him as a sinking builder. I could be wrong, but with his only skills that apply count being his 3 and 4 coin skills, it's gonna take working around him. I'm experienced enough with stack building now to know that a good player doesn't need every unit to be count positive, but I can't say a total of 5 procs outside of Furioso is enough for me to feel confident in his sinking generation, especially since 3 of those are UB conditional. If anything, he hits me like someone who's gonna be better at juicing sinking with a Shin type and Indulgent Furioso, with either a team or ego gifts that'll build that sinking for him. And before I forget, his support passive is really cute. You ever try to throw your friend into a fight and say they have the grace of God on their side? This sucker will apply a flat buff to damage to any units the first time they use a skill of a certain damage type. In other words, it can activate on 3 skills per turn if you use all the damage types, and there isn't any clause here that excludes ego. Plus, index units get an extra buff, even if this man's is the only one that can inflict pierce right now. Overall, he fits at home on a sinking team that can balance its stack well, but who are we kidding, he's gonna be fine in general. Poise units don't really work together much outside of the Blade lineage, and he seems self-sufficient on that front anyway, so I'm not seeing too much point in him being stacked with a Pride or a Poise team. Ego-wise, Bygone Days and Great Trichilocosm are the best fits, and depending on whether you're choosing Clash Power or Violence, either Hay can fill that slot. As for Teths, look, I would love to sit here and tell you that 4th match flame applying burn matters to this ID. No matter the ego though, she's gonna need some help generating resources for it, unless they're super dedicated to Fell Bullet. But that's about it! So how'd you feel about handling the kit in this way? I feel like most of the time starting with the statuses works for the best, and we did start off in that direction. But with so much info on all 3 pages, focusing on how to scale Yi-Song felt like the better use of the time and less confusing than just going down the list of effects. Either way, hope y'all are happy with your pulls and sparks. Now let's get to that member and patron Q&A. Alrighty, today's member and patron Q&A comes from Random the Rando, who asks, what is your favorite piece of PM media? Games, literature, anything? Oh, believe it or not, while I will still glaze Distortion Detective to high heaven, it's gotta be Lobotomy Corp. Call it nostalgia bias or whatever, but it is what got me into Project Moon and kind of proved to me that a game that is intentionally painful, intentionally confusing, and does everything it can to obscure information from you so that you've got this entire sense of info overload as often as possible, was probably the best thing I could have had at that time in my life. Plus, I'm not gonna lie, 2025 was a rough-ass year for me, and face the fear, build the future has been my living motto for a long-ass time, and it high-key got me through it. I can't front, so this wins it hands down.